What is going on, guys? Nathan here with another MTG deck theory video, and today I'm going to be covering this mono blue EDH deck that I have made. Clocks in at around $115 here, and this deck essentially pretty much embodies what is fun about EDH. This is very much a spirit of the format type of deck. For those of you who have seen my other videos, I do not like at all, actually, the cutthroat $1,000 decks that are made for Magic. And I just think that all of that nonsense, if you're not in a competitive setting, is the most unfun, just bullshit that exists out there. So I try to make decks that really just fit the spirit of the format, that are fun to play, and yeah, well, basically fun is goal number one above all else. And blue actually does pretty well in EDH, in my opinion, because it really excels when a lot of your opponents are playing high mana cost things, so that you can copy, for example, high mana cost creatures, you can counter high mana cost spells, and you can just run a bunch of shenanigans that are fun in EDH. So we'll go ahead and start off here with the commander. Thassa is very much optional in this deck. There are other better blue commanders to fit the deck. In fact, you might even want to look at the commander that makes it so that whenever an opponent targets your creatures for the first time in a turn, that spell is countered. That is also a good choice. But the reason why I choose Thassa is because her Scry ability really helps you be more consistent in your draws and hit your land. And your land is very important because there is very little mana acceleration in terms of land acceleration, and you are more instead reliant upon your artifact mana acceleration. Also, her ability to make a creature unblockable is very nice as well. And because this is a mono blue deck, she also fits in well with her devotion. Although it is rare that you actually hit the 5 devotion, just because blue does not run, well, this specific deck for blue does not run a ton of creatures and or enchantments where you'll actually get that devotion counter off of those permanents. What is going on here? There we go. Okay. Oops. I guess Chrome was just taking a little bit to load here. Okay, so very unprofessional, my apologies, but looks like the internet is a little bit slow. So basically, again, Thassa's pretty much just an optional commander. I like to have her because she's very consistent, and she allows you to definitely scry through a bunch of garbage that you don't want or don't need at the time, and she's just a very, very good in the early game, so that she can sort of move you into the late game very smoothly. Okay, so these are my custom categories, and I guess there's not really a particular category that is good to start out with, but we'll go ahead and address the mana base. So because it's mono blue, it's going to be nothing special for the lands. You have 28 islands. Halimar Depths is always a classic include. Fairy Conclave if you need a chump blocker to block just a massive creature that is swinging at you. Coral Atoll for a little bit of acceleration. Lonely Sandbar for cycling. Nykthos for the devotion counters. This is also possibly an include or disinclude, because again, I haven't found that I don't get a lot of devotion using this deck, and actually, in hindsight, I think I might want to actually take this out, just because it's so hard to reach that devotion, just because of the nature of blue. Reliquary Tower for the no max hand size, that is pretty much an auto-include. Remote Isle for more cycling. And Terrain Generator for that mana acceleration. And Terrain Generator is going to be amazing, because you are often going to have a ton of cards in hand. And I guess while I'm talking about card draw, we'll move on to our card draw category. So 10 cards devoted to drawing cards here, which is pretty significant. in comparison to a lot of other decks, I suppose, that I do. Plus, you have the Thassa Scry ability, or Thassa Scry ability. So, you're definitely going to be having a lot of cards in hand, and you're probably never going to run out of fuel. Brain Geyser is pretty much an auto-include in any blue deck for that X blue cost, very cheap to draw cards. Brainstorm is going to be an excellent card in your opening hand so that you can hit whatever you need, essentially. You can keep your hand fresh with good stuff. Concentrate is a very basic card draw card, auto-include as well. Fact or Fiction, classic card, auto-include. Intellectual Offering is definitely an interesting card in Commander, because it's nice card draw. Drawing 3 cards for 5 mana is not that bad, but I actually like it more for its second ability, because untapping all of your non-land permanents that I control really helps to prepare myself for any sort of hate that might be coming my way, because depending on the play group that you're in, a lot of people might not like mono blue and you messing with their stuff, basically. So Intellectual Offering is definitely a good card to possibly persuade an ally, or try to become allies with somebody, and also more so for defense. Mind Spring is pretty much the same as Brain Geyser. And Recurring Insight is a classic auto-include. I can't believe this card is not more expensive. But this is essentially, in the best case scenario, draw 14 cards over the course of 2 turns. I've definitely hit Recurring Insight off of 12 cards, targeting an opponent with 6 cards in hand. So that is definitely a very fun card. Rhystic Study is a classic auto-include. Really, if Rhystic Study does not draw you cards, which it is supposed to do, if anything, it is very useful because it drains the opponent's resources, which is actually what I really appreciate about it. For 3 mana, you can either have a ton of card draw, or you can drain each opponent for possibly 2 or 3 mana every turn, which is pretty nice. Sphinx of Uthun is basically the same thing as Fact or Fiction with its extra effect, but you get a 5/6 flyer body as well. It's a nice late game card draw card. And Ugin's Insight, which is a newer Battle for Zendikar sorcery, where you can scry X, where X is probably going to be around, well, depending on what you have on the field, it really depends match by match, because if you manage to copy an opponent's creature where, oh, well, I suppose copies would put tokens, which has a convert mana cost of 0. But if anything, at the very least, you are going to have Thassa on the field, which she should pretty much always be on the field, even if she costs 5 or 7 mana, just so you can keep smoothing out your draws. So if anything, at a minimum, you're going to be scrying for 3, and then drawing for 3, which is definitely worth 3 mana. For our mana acceleration, we have Cage Sun, which is a very nice card because, especially in the mono color decks, cards like Cage Sun and even Gauntlet of Power I would include if it weren't $15, are definitely auto-includes in these types of decks. Mind Stone is a nice early game ramp card with an extra card draw effect. Sapphire Medallion, again in the monocolor for decks, good include. Sol Ring, classic Sol Ring doesn't even need to be said. Solemn Simulacrum, this is like one of the best ramp cards ever to grace EDH, in my opinion. You get land acceleration, and then you get card draw and a 2/2 body. This card is just so versatile, and I can definitely see why it's worth $4. Thought Vessel is another, this is one of the more valuable ramp cards, even though it's a common and it doesn't seem to do a lot. The maximum hand size is so important because you can have massive Brain Geysers or massive Mind Springs or massive Recurring Insights, and you can be completely safe because you don't have any max hand size. Same with Reliquary Tower. Durant Dynamo is one of those cards you could probably take out, and if you wanted to sort of make the deck a little bit cheaper, you can take this out and replace it with perhaps Worn Power Stone. But I actually happen to have No, okay. I have a couple of Durant Dynamos on hand, but not in this specific deck. Anyway, this is one of those cards that it's really good, and I think that the deck needs good mana acceleration, so I decided to leave it in even if it is $6. So again, before I move on, actually, I want to sort of repeat, like, I try to keep my decks around the $100 mark, while not completely gutting a deck of its style or theme. And I just like that because in my play group, I'm not going up against cutthroat decks or anything like that. Like whenever me and my friends have an EDH night, it's pretty much just to chill out, have some fun, and play some Magic. So if they're using decks that are even pre-built, I don't know if we've battled with the pre-built commander decks before. So those decks are not obviously win on turn 4 and have a $1,000 budget. So I think that the $100 mark is very good, and it leaves you enough breathing room to really get in some decent, fun spells in these types of decks. So that's why I just felt like, somebody might be watching this video and be like, wow, he's really concerned with a $6 card. Like, that's nothing, but it's true. Like, if you made every card in this deck cost $6, then all of a sudden it's going to be a super expensive deck, and that is something that I always like to stay away from. So self-protection is really nice, and these are just the combat tricks that you can pull when pretty much in the late game, or if you happen to piss somebody off. Aetherize is super trolly, and this will definitely help with those beatdown decks that are so popular, and those decks I actually like to run myself. So Aetherize is just one of those cards where it's like, it's kind of the red button in terms of making friends, because this is going to piss somebody off, and you're going to have an enemy on your hand. Crawl Space is a classic card, and it's, again, helpful with those aggro decks. Fog Bank is just the trolliest chump blocker, and I figured that I definitely wanted to include this card because it's so fun to just basically have an invulnerable chumper that will take down the opponent's largest creature in combat. Propaganda, pretty much the same thing. Well, it's the same thing as Ghostly Prison, but for blue. Again, a good include. And then Wall of Frost is another Fog Bank type of card where it's really fun to sort of make it so that your opponents just don't want to attack you. Same thing as Propaganda or Crawl Space. It's just nobody wants to go up against the Wall of Frost because it's so goddamn annoying, which is the spirit of blue. Okay, and I guess, again, this isn't the best order, but I will continue down the line, I suppose. The downright cruel cards are the cards that will make enemies immediately at the Magic table. Mana Short essentially cheats a player out of playing spells for their turn. And this is another good self-protection card, because if you are down to a 1v1 and you draw Mana Short, that'll buy you another turn, help you set up for something, anything really, that will help you survive that 1v1. Sleep, again, buys you another turn in a 1v1 situation, or this also sort of prevents a player who happens to have power spiked to really make use of that power spike. So again, another mean card. And then Washout. Washout is particularly useful because so many decks in EDH are mono or dual colored, and you can definitely hit a lot of creatures with a certain color target. So, for example, a lot of decks run black in EDH, and this will hit a ton of creatures, even if, if there isn't a mono black deck at the table, there's probably going to be a dual colored or tricolored deck that is running any sort of creatures with a black mana symbol in there, and Washout will hit those creatures. So I don't know, particularly useful. Beaters is classic Frost Titan. Frost Titan's just one of those cards that's just really fun. All of the Titans are really fun, but Frost Titan is classic blue shenanigans where you have freezing creatures, and he has a little bit of protection, stickiness to the board with his first ability, countering spells. Stormtide Leviathan is going to be your late game savior when creatures without flying or island walk cannot attack, but you've got an 8/8 on the board ready and rearing to kick some face in. Classic blue card, very much an auto include in a mono blue deck. And then we've got some counter spells. So counter spells are particularly useful here, and especially in EDH when people are casting massive, enormous spells. And there are 7 of them, which I feel is appropriate because it feels like you either have a counterspell in hand constantly, ready to sort of get rid of anything that might not be beneficial for you. And by that I mean, if an opponent plays Stormherd, for example, but you know that they're going to be using those tokens to target another player, just because there's only 7 counterspells in the deck, I don't know if I would necessarily counter that spell. Well, Stormherd might not be the best example, because that's a really massive, massive spell, and that would need to be countered. But what I mean to say is that a counterspell is usually only a draw or 2 away if you don't have one in your hand, so these are definitely useful, but they also are a little bit higher mana cost because they give you an additional effect. So Counterspell is pretty much the most basic 2 mana counter target spell. $6 card, but it's just so good that I wanted to leave it in there. Desertion, again, you can counter just a massive mana cost creature, and you get that card onto your battlefield, which is going to be awesome. So if somebody plays, Artisan of Kozilek or an Ulamog or whatever, then you can go ahead and steal that, which is great. Disdainful Stroke, again, lots of high mana cost spells running around, so having that 2 mana cost counter target spell is great. Dismiss for extra card draw. Dissolve for a little bit of extra scry. Overwhelming Intellect is going to basically do the same thing as, it's going to just be a ton of card draw. So even though, again, these only 10 card draw cards in the actual category here, there are things like Overwhelming Intellect and Dismiss that will also sort of keep your hand full. And then Spelljack is nice as well. You go ahead and steal your opponent's spells. Miscellaneous Diluvian Primordial can be super fun, especially in the late game when people have accumulated very interesting instants and sorceries in their graveyards. Fool's Demise is going to keep your creatures onto the battlefield, and this is particularly useful if you steal a nice, I don't know if it would work on a creature that has, let's see, when an enchanted creature dies, return that card. Okay. So yeah, it would work on either a creature that your opponents control or just stolen creatures as well. So Fool's Demise, an interesting card, really annoying to get rid of too. Part the Water Veil for extra turn taking, and again, there's more late game potential with the Awaken. You have a nice 6/6 hasty creature, and it's just a land, so that's great. Spellbook, no max hand size. Again, it's really important to hit these no max hand size so that you can just draw a ton of cards without worrying about anything else. And Temporal Trespass, this card is super useful. Quite often you can cast it for 6, 5 even, if you have a lot of cards in your graveyard. So another late game card. Breaching Leviathan is going to be amazing. Tap all non-blue creatures. Those creatures don't untap during their controller's next untap step. So a massive beater and just very, very good control. Cyclonic Rift is also an auto-include. It has jumped up to $6.40 now. This card, when the Blue Commander deck came out, was originally like $1. So people have definitely seen the value in Cyclonic Rift, just because its overload cost is so good. Devastation Tide, even if you don't play this for its miracle cost, this is definitely useful as a sort of red button, pretty much as a board wipe. So this is blue's version of a board wipe. That's pretty much as close as you're going to get. So I felt that it was worth including as well. Icy Blast is going to... I wouldn't say that it'll really piss people off, because a lot of the time... if I'm the blue player at the table, I'm sort of the policeman of the group. Like, I sort of target the person who has the highest amount of power at the time. So anyway, Icy Blast is really nice because you're almost always going to get the Ferocious Trigger, because the nature of EDH means that there are massive creatures on the board, including you can play your own massive creatures or steal them using other means. So tapping those target creatures is going to be super useful, and it's just classic blue control. It's good stuff. And Scourge of Fleets is amazing as well. Lots of bounce. And X is the number of islands you control. Obviously, you are going to have approximately 7 islands if you play this card, minus whatever artifact ramp. So even at the very worst, let's say you can produce 2 mana through artifact ramp. Let's say you have a Soul Ring out there and you cast this with using 5 islands, then you're going to be returning each creature your opponent's control toughness 5 or less to its owner's hand, which includes most creatures. So anyway, just another great board wipe with the bounce. And Copycats, we have Cackling Counterpart. This is good if you combine it with something like any sort of thievery, or well, yeah, pretty much. Followed Footsteps is also a great card because it is recurring copy creatures, so that's also a great card. Phyrexian Metamorph is great because it can target an artifact or a creature on the battlefield. So if you need extra mana and an opponent has a Soul Ring out there, you can go ahead and copy that. Otherwise, if you want to copy your opponent's Terastodon or whatever, then you can go ahead and have something like a 9/9. Whatever you want, really. The greatness of this card is that it provides options. Rite of Replication is a classic blue spell. You always want to hit that kicker cost and put 5 tokens. I have seen this used before where it does target a Wormcoil Engine, and then the player with 5 Wormcoil Engines pretty much wins the game. Stolen Identity is awesome because you get the initial effect, which is that token, which is a copy of target artifact or creature. But then the reason why it costs 6 mana is because of the Cipher effect. So again, you can combine with this with Thassa's 2 mana ability, where target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. So hopefully you Cipher this onto a creature and you have it deal combat damage using Thassa's ability, and you activate the Stolen Identity trigger again. Supplant Form is good control, but also you get a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of the creature you want to control. So this is just very good in EDH because you can bounce like a 9/9 or an 8/8, and then all of a sudden you have a 9/9 or an 8/8 for very little mana. Vesuvian Doppelganger is basically just a token, a copy of target creature on the battlefield, except that you can have it switch to other creatures on the battlefield at the beginning of your upkeep, which is pretty interesting. Targeted Control, Aether Gale is another just good control card, basically a board wipe, except that you get to choose what bounces. So, big fan of this card. I wish there were more cards like Aether Gale. Distorting Wake. This card, again, is just amazing. Pretty much the same thing as Aether Gale, but for a little bit more mana, where you just get to bounce whatever you want. Hoverguard Sweepers for that extra bounce effect, plus you get a 5/6 flyer body. Phyrexian Ingester is going to be a massive creature because in EDH, again, you can target those big creatures on the board. So if you get to exile an 8/8, then all of a sudden you have an 11/11, and you manage to exile an 8/8, which is definitely not bad. Rapid Hybridization for that extra removal. That 1 mana destroy target creature is very nice, and the 3/3 token typically does not matter all that much, just because in EDH you have 40 life, so that 3/3 creature is not that big compared to other creatures on the board. And Reality Shift is, again, just an amazing card. You get the exile target creature, so even better than destroy, and the owner manifests the top card of his or library, which I think will often... I suppose this card is interesting because the manifest can turn against you, but if it's a land, which it usually has approximately like a 40%, 30 to 40% chance of being, then it's just a 2/2 creature, which is very nice. And Thievery, Blatant Thievery, classic blue card. It's just so good. Confiscate, you control enchanted permanent, so this can actually target like artifacts or whatever. I've noticed in my games that I ran Control Magic instead of Confiscate, and I noticed that it's more important a lot of the times to use this to control something like an enchantment, because the creature, like a lot of the time, the creatures aren't the problem on the battlefield. It's enchantments or artifacts that are really locking players down. So this helps to get rid of that lockdown effect and turn it in your favor, so that now you are the person locking people down, which is great. And then Kaiga the Tidestar, just a really nice 5/5 flyer, and when it dies, gain control of target creature, which is a permanent effect, not just an enchanting effect, which can be destroyed. For example, Confiscate. And Volition Reigns is pretty much the same thing as Confiscate, except for 1 more blue mana instead of colorless, which doesn't matter because you're a mono blue deck. You actually take control of enchanted permanent, and you get to untap it if it happens to be tapped. So a little bit more utility there for an extra blue mana. And the classic Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots here. I don't know if much needs to be said about these because they're they're very much Commander staples. So, and then we have a massive maybe board here. For example, Pongify, just other cards that I have found useful but didn't make the cut necessarily. For example, I had Lorthos in there for a while, but the reason why he got moved or he got cut is because his effect basically locks down my own mana even if he manages to attack. So I don't know, there's just a bunch of, like, Muldrifter, you know, that's another classic blue card, but it's just, I'd rather include the higher cost card draw than something like Muldrifter, but anyway, that is going to pretty much wrap up this deck. Again, this is Mono Blue Funstuff, and I should actually probably change the title to make it cost about 115. Mono Blue Funstuff, just embodying what makes blue fun, drawing a bunch of cards, returning a bunch of things to hand, countering really massive spells, putting copies of stuff, and just messing with people. Which I have been a Timmy player for forever, basically, since I started Magic. So me from 2 years ago would look at this deck that I managed to create and just turn my nose up at it. But now that I'm wiser and have found, not necessarily went over to the dark side of control decks, but this deck sort of combines the better control aspects with really interesting creatures, so it sort of scratches both itches that you might have as a Timmy player and or somebody who wants to just piss people off, which Mono Blue tends to do. So anyway, that's the deck, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Again, if you're looking for cutthroat decks that win on turn 4, then this is not what you should be looking for. This is a list of fun cards that you play during, you know, your Commander night, just to have fun. So that's pretty much it. And if you guys like the video, feel free to leave a rating and feel free to subscribe. And that is it. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all later.